I'm going to show you a quick and unedited view of my shop and its contents, but you'll have to tolerate the jiggles and the wiggles because it's not well edited, and I don't think too many are going to be interested anyway. So if you can't stand the jiggles, you can turn it off. This sanding machine right here I made in about 1985 when I was in Michigan, or 86, and I never have used it because it didn't really work the way I wanted it to. If it worked fine as long as the boards were kept moving through, but if the boards paused for a moment, those two sanding discs there would cut a dip in the board, and it did spoil it. So I haven't used it, but I haven't had the time or energy or ambition to just throw it away either. So this thing is kind of an interesting story. This motor here came from Reuben in California, Shirley's uncle. I was out to Los Angeles on a business trip one time, and I'd had some little time, so I decided to drive up to Bear Lake where they were living and visit them. So I did, and of course, Reuben and I walked around and talked, and he had a little garage there, and he repaired radios, old radios. But he had this motor sitting in the corner, and he told me that he was his dad, and of course when he was young, were rice farmers in Arkansas, and they had a pump house where they and a well where they got their own water. They're out in the country, of course. But anyway, his dad bought this spare motor for the pump house in case the motor in there burned out. They wouldn't be waiting several days or a week to get a new motor. So this motor was brand new, and when Reuben's father died, they sold off the farm, and Reuben took this motor and moved it to California with him. And anyway, he said he'd been lugging it around for 30 years, and he's tired of it. And he said, if I wanted it, I could have it. And of course, it was perfect for this project. So I put it in a box and checked it as luggage and flew it back to Michigan and put it in here. But it's only run half an hour or so on this contraption, so it's still essentially a brand new motor. It's too big for the belt sander though, so I don't remember what horsepower it is. It might even be a 2, but it's a nice motor. And then this old transmission here, this thing right here, when we lived in Michigan, our backyard was a forest of trees, and a lot of trees with leaves on them, various brands. But anyway, I was walking around back there one day, and I saw this garden tractor just about buried under leaves that had accumulated over many years. And it had 2 big tires on it, and amazingly enough, the tires were still inflated. And the neighbor said that that thing had been out there since World War II. And I believe it. It looked like a pre-war kind of contraption. But I was looking for a transmission to reduce the speed about 300 to 1, because I wanted these 2 middle drums to run at a high speed, whereas the feed drums, these outside ones, had to go slowly to feed the board. So there's a very wide disparity in the rotational speeds of those 4 rollers. And so I got to looking at this tractor, and I checked the ratios, and it was exactly 300 to 1. So I tore the old transmission out of that old tractor and installed it here, and it actually worked very well. It was a perfect ratio. The table goes up and down. This chain here and these sprockets, if you turn the wheel at the a handle on the other side over there in that corner, it'll raise these shelves and this bottom up and down so that you can sand the thickness of the board that you're trying to sand. You're not trying to take off a lot of material with this machine. You're just trying to take off a very few thousandths of surface material. So it had to be adjustable fairly precisely. I spent a lot of time on it. I had a lot of fun doing it, and I found various parts and junk. I didn't buy very much. I bought some chain. I think I spent about $40 on the whole thing, but it was all a wasted effort. There was a lot of development time getting these springs, all this stuff, doomed to the junkyard. Transformers and whatever. And this is my sprinkler system, spare parts. And all these pieces, airline pressure gauges and regulators and stuff that I've picked up from dismantling or remodeling at the factory or whatever, and plumbing pieces of various sorts. All this stuff comes in handy when you need something. I can usually find something to make it work. And underneath all this pile of junk here is various pieces of metal and steel. It looks like junk, but when I needed a piece of certain size or whatever of steel or aluminum, I can usually find something and machine it down and make it work. So if it's shiny, you don't throw it away, and when it's dull, you keep it. And this shelf here is just, I've got all kinds of bolts and stuff that I've accumulated over the years. I haven't bought a bolt or a screw in a long time. Nails and whatever, brass pieces. So I turn this stuff on the lathe and make all kinds of stuff. I made mostly clock parts out of this stuff. And springs and so forth. This machine here, I was given this machine. This is a lighting head, and you set this thing in a position so that for every revolution this will turn a certain amount. And so if you're cutting gears or something and you want the teeth evenly spaced, that's what you use. And I use this to make the flutes on my clock posts in the front. These long posts with the grooves located properly by this thing here, and routed in each subsequent position. So that's an expensive piece, and it's worth $500 or $600. This is my radial drill that I got from my son-in-law Billy about 30 years ago. He had bought it from a company he worked for, but he didn't want it, so I bought it from him. I'm pretty good use to it. I've had to do some alterations to the bearings on the spindle, but it's been trouble-free. It's a nice machine. And over here, this aluminum thing hanging there is a router, a fixture in order to cut circles of various diameters. The router mounts here, and pivot point is variable depending on what you need. And this is Dad's old toolbox for his clock repair, or watch repair business that he had back in the 20s. Not really, he just did them for a few dollars, I guess. But I can't work on watches. The stuff is too fine. But some of these old tools here just dates back to the 20s and the teens. These are gas cutters and some specialized watch tools that that's a little vise, a little watch vise I've never used it. I don't like to monkey with it. It's fine stuff. And these are, oh, this is my bag of spare clock hands. There's quite a few of them in there. Of course, I never have the right one, it seems. These are various pieces of clocks and spare keys and old watches from Dad's area. Pieces of watches. And these are clock spring retainers. I use those all the time. And these are bobs, clock bobs, and other parts, pieces. Same here. Various little pieces of junk. And his old eyeglass piece. But anyway, that's 100 years old already. This contraption here I made a few years ago. Tom worked for a company that sorted and assembled screws and parts automatically, and they had a screw a little set screw that they had to orient so that the screw pointed downward so they could drive it rapidly, and they were having trouble separating them. So I came up with this contraption that's mechanically operated, and that was its downfall. It wasn't automated, but anyway, it did. You fed the screw through this little hole here, and as you rotated this arm, it detected whether the screw was in the right direction or not, and then dropped it. It worked. It actually worked pretty good, but too crude for his sophisticated company. It was just fun to do that. And these are clockworks that I bought on eBay. I probably paid an average of $15 for them, and of course they were wrecks when I got them, but I've taken them all apart. This is an example of one here. Took it completely apart and looked at every pivot point and rebushed it. You can see the little circles around the hole. Those are new bushings that I put in there and repaired the shafts, a lot of them. It's odd, but most of the time the shaft is what's really worn. You wouldn't think that this hard steel shaft, this little steel rod that goes back from each side here, you wouldn't think that would wear faster than the brass. But what happens is that the brass picks up the dirt and embeds in it, and then as the steel shaft is turning, that piece of dirt acts as a little cutting tool and cuts the steel. So frequently the shaft is terrible, but the bushing can be still reasonably good. But anyway, sometimes the gears were stripped and bent and whatever, but these all run well. Well, that hand's bent there, but a lot of times the springs are broken. But it takes a little time to take all that apart, and clean it up, and repair it, and put it back together. I think there's 4 of them in here in that category. I thought maybe I'd make clock cases for them, but that's not going to happen. I'm done making clock cases. These are different models and different brands that come from different companies, and they're all made 100 years ago and more. Some 130 years, but they're all at least 100 years old. Yeah, I've got four good ones in there. They're probably worth $100 a piece, something like that, on eBay. And these are clock parts, extra clock parts that I've accumulated. And then some clock dials back here, and a fancy bob. And that little clock, that little house clock back there, you can buy parts for those yet, but that one needs a balance wheel, and it's about $50, and I don't feel inclined to spend $50 on it. But it was my mother's. It came from my mother's parents, and I have one upstairs that actually runs. too. And this one would run. It wouldn't be difficult to fix that one, but I just don't want to spend the money on it. And there's various tools of all kinds. I've accumulated over the years. Some are real old. This is a real old one. And some are pretty new. And my electrical diagnosis, my Wiggy and my voltmeter here. And these are taps and dies, metric and US threads, die sets. And this is a circular glass cutter. There's a little diamond right here, and the suction cup holds it in place. And as you swing around, you etch the surface of the glass, and it creates a stress riser, and it'll let it snap at the cut. And all these tools. This is a vacuum pump here that I used a few times. I don't know where I got it. Picked it up somewhere. Oh yeah, I know where I got that. Bud Neat bought that for me. Yeah, in 1995. I overhauled his, I think it was a 68 Corvette. I did it was from the bolts up, and I needed a vacuum system to work the vacuum operated windshield wiper cover and several vacuum operated pieces on that Corvette. So he bought me that that vacuum pump, so I could test and adjust that stuff. That was quite a project. I even had to get the speedometer repainted, and well, it was pretty bad. And these are other tools. This is my skill saw and power planer and engraver and buffing wheel, and a little pin nailer and soldering gun and a router in underneath here in that blue container, blue bag. My paint spray guns that I don't use anymore. And a little torch and my nail gun. And this is a smaller router in there, a nice little setup for small work. So it looks like I have about three routers, 3 hand routers, and this is a big old belt sander here that I use a lot. And my DeWalt, I bought this as a Christmas present to me last Christmas. This one, and an impact gun that goes with it. Now this is the impact, the drill motor too that goes with it. Those two. I need a battery for that. Well, anyway, this is my workbench, which I've described previously. Accumulated over the years. And this is my spray guns up here. These are Harbor Freight guns, and they're the best guns I've ever used. This only cost $10 for that spray gun, and it sprays better than this $150 50-year-old DeVilbiss that I bought. I paid $150 for this 45 or 50 years ago, and I wouldn't use it again. After I got this, I couldn't believe how much better that worked. Anyway, this is Jebby's picture. He's been dead, gosh, 10 years now already. He was a little pistol. You can see it in his eyes. And there's my Lord there knocking at the door. Anyway, this little contraption here, right here, with a hole in it, is a magnetizer or a demagnetizer. In other words, if you want to magnetize something, you hold the little button down and hold the piece in there, and it'll magnetize it. If you want to demagnetize it, you hold the button down and run it in and out, and it'll kill the magnetization on it. It's clever. I've used it. My son-in-law Bob Coker gave me that a number of years ago. the Chardoffs. The night Chevy died, I took him for a walk. Actually, I carried him, and I stopped at Chardoffs, and they took my picture. And then they made this. The kids made this frame and stuff for me. It's pretty cool. And now here's my sandblaster, which I don't use very often. Anyway, my wood vise I got from Dad. I've used that, well, ever since I can remember. That was in his workshop at home when I was a kid, and I brought it down here in 1957, and when I made this workbench, and so that's I've done a lot of clamping and holding on that thing. It's getting a little ragged up the top end, but it works fine. And these drawers are my drill bits, all kinds of drill bits, old ones that I got from Dad back there for hand auger, basically, although I've altered them so I can use them on my electric drill, but I don't need to use those very much. You know, various stuff. These are letter drills. These are wood. No, these are numbered drills, and these are wood drills, and these are steel for steel. And in this box are 14 bits for wood, make flat bottom holes in wood. That's just sandpaper in there. This is just various miscellaneous stuff. When I don't have a place for something, it goes into this drawer. I made this table out of a tree that I cut on the farm when I was about 14 or so. I don't know what possessed me, but I decided that I had to cut this huge pine tree up in the woods. And I remember cutting through it at the bottom, and it wouldn't fall. It was trapped, the top was trapped by other trees. And so I didn't know what to do. I didn't do anything. I just left it. And the next day a wind came up and blew it down. But Dad wasn't very pleased with me. But in any case, he found the guy, or took it to the sawmill and made the boards and stuff out of it. And he made these 2 by 10 or 12s out of them. And they were in the barn then for, I don't know, 10 years maybe, whatever. And one day I was up there, and I decided I'd make a perfect workbench, but I only had a 1954, and I lived in Louisville, 500 miles away, so I wasn't going to be able to pay for transportation or anything like that. So I cut them in lengths that I could fit in my trunk. And boy, I had that old Ford really sinking to the ground. But anyway, I got them to Louisville. I got this whole top is made out of the same stuff. Got them down here and put them together, and I made that workbench. So I've had that workbench for over 70 years. 70? No, yeah, 6. Well, let's see. If it was 1960, it'd be over 60 years I've had it. I've done a lot of projects on that bench. Underneath here is a piece of railroad rail. Dad was a telegraph operator, and frequently the rails would break, and the repairman would come with a big bandsaw and cut the rail off and put a new piece in it. And so he got this guy to cut him some pieces. I think 4 of them, and they make a great anvil. I've used that quite a bit to bend things around and so forth. It's got so many different shapes on it that it really makes it a handy piece of steel to have. Not something I use every day, but I've made good use of it over the years. That's my DeWalt cut-off saw, chop saw. It's not very old, maybe, I don't know, 5 years, something like that. I've got it marked somewhere on it. All my tools have my name and date that I got them. But anyway, that's really a nice tool. That's one of my favorite. That and this unisaw here. That tool there is the heart of the whole shop, and it's really a great tool. Precision and just performs perfectly. And I got some spear saw blades up there and all these tools. A lot of this stuff that you're looking at I got from Dad, although I bought stuff too. A lot of these tools here, for example, Dad made these himself on a forge that he made in his workshop. These are made out of car tie rods, or sway bars rather. I remember sway bars they're high tensile, ductile to a certain extent, but really hard material. He really liked them to make chisels and stuff. He tinkered too, to some extent, although not as much as I have, I guess. Anyway, this is where I do my clockwork. I've got this little jeweler's lathe here that it works. It's all manual, obviously, and it's got little collets for various sizes. I think I could clamp up a hair in the smallest collet. The whole series of collets that come with it right here, and it's a nice little tool. It's only good to take off a few thousandths at the most. It's too light duty for any heavy cutting. These are just holding fixtures for clockworks that I made. And this is spring winder that I made to wind the clock springs. When you get a clock spring that's unwound, it's kind of a pain to get it back wound up. And these are various tools. These are my little drill set. Tiny. These are not the smallest drills I have, but these are the ones that I use mostly. I've got a set of drills that go down to just a 2 or 3 thousandths in diameter, but I've not had occasion to use them in any degree. That's a micrometer. These are little brooches for brass for the clocks. There's a reamer and little brooches to open up the hole, a thousandth or two. These are little jeweler's files. And these little clock tools. Anyway, various. This wire here is what I use to make clock gear shafts. This is special steel for that purpose that I bought. And all these brass. Oh, come on here. Get hold of the thing. Oh, that's the hinge side. No wonder we're no. All these little brass washers and parts. Parts, little nuts and stuff that I always find to use. Those are handy. And then, of course, I keep my brass screws in here, all sizes and shapes. And this is the box of collets for this lathe. And it, you can see some, here's a collet that the triangle that meets there in the center is where you insert your piece of steel that you want turned. And so if your piece is small enough to fit in the center hole of this thing, then that goes in here, and when you tighten this wheel, it squeezes these triangles down tight against it and holds it while this thing turns. It's really pretty precision stuff, very expensive. This is pre-war stuff. This is a pre-war lathe. It's pretty crude, but it was free. My son-in-law Bob Coker gave it to me when he was in the Marines during Korean War. He decided he wanted to be a clockmaker, so after he got out, he went to school and learned to be a clockmaker or watchmaker. And he used his stuff, and but he didn't. He decided that was not what he wanted to do. So he got a job at GE as a foreman out there and became warehouse manager at near Sacramento there. Thanks, Bob. Appreciate that lathe. He gave it to me about 10 years ago or so. Screwdriver set. Some pretty tiny screws in some of these clocks. It's incredible that they could even make them. But anyway, that's my workstation. This box I made about 50 years ago. All these wrenches. I bought these wrenches here. This set right here. These are my old friends that I bought when Shirley and I were just married to repair the transmission in my 41 Mercury. Yeah, I've had those 70 years. A lot of this stuff is old. 50 years, 60 years. This set here, I traded a dozen golf balls for. We had a party, a GE party, and there was a lot of prizes given. And I won a set of dozen golf balls. I guess they were supposed to be the best premier stuff. Anyway, this friend of mine, oh boy, he said, "Oh, I wish I'd have won those. I don't need these darned old wrenches." So boy, it didn't take long to make that swap. So I really used these a lot over the years. They're kind of an odd brand, but they've been perfectly fine. Yeah, gosh, that's 60 years since I've done that. Yeah. Odd stuff. This is a ring compressor to squeeze piston rings down tight when you're overhauling an engine. To get the piston back in its hole, you got to squeeze the rings down flush, and that's my ring compressor. And I've used that a number of times. A nasty job. These are all old tools, or to the most part, although these clamps I bought probably 50 years ago. And there's some newer ones here. They're only 30 maybe, or 20, whatever. But these are very useful. I've been over to this tool display more than once, that's for sure. This piece of wood hanging here, I carved in December 1940 on a barn door there at home. I remember it was a cold, sunny day, but really cold, and I did the barn work, and I don't know what gave me the idea to do it. I mean, there was a lot of other carving on that barn that my uncles and dad had done over the 50, 70 years before that, during that time, and so I decided to do that. But gosh, 1940, that's 80 years ago. I'm getting old. So I was 11 years old when I carved that. And this is a radial arm saw I bought 50 years ago. I don't use it much anymore now that I've got the chop saw that's so much better, quicker and more accurate. So that's been a good old saw, and it's in good shape. These are all various tools and instruments, dial indicators and so forth that you need if you're going to I'll make stuff with reasonable accuracy. This contraption back here, that's another one of my brainstorms that never worked out. I wanted to cut spiral flutes on this, and I did, but all the work I went to make that thing, plus its associated parts, certainly wasn't worth it. But anyway, I've got it set up so that one turn, 300 turns here will result in one turn of the wood. And of course I've got this variable gearing set up on down here so I can vary the spiral distances, but it's it was fun to do. But I my own contraption, and I run a chain up to here from the chuck, and I think this is a 300-to-1 ratio too. And as the chuck turns, the output then is reduced through this gearbox, and then from here to the part is another chain, and then the chuck, and then of course this, and so the workpiece would be in here, or whatever length you're using. So, but this is the chuck that I made. This chucks up into the that chuck over there, and there's a bearing out of a telephone truck boom in here, big old thrust bearing, and this turns through the gearbox and then back down, and then this turns 300 times less than this one. So this is some of the stuff I made, just trial run stuff 20 years ago or whatever. And I was able to rough it out and make different things, but I don't know. I lost interest in it had. Oh, I know what happened. This part here held the router, and the router burned up, so I never replaced it. That's why. That's right. I remember now the reason this junk is laying there. But anyway, and that's my emergency generator that I bought about 10 years ago, and thankfully I've never had to use. But anyway, I can use it if I have to. I bought it more for Shirley. I was concerned about her well-being. If it happened during the winter, especially, there wouldn't be any way to keep her warm without the furnace. That's my. Oh, I didn't talk about my planer here, did I? No, this is thickness planer. This is old too. This is, oh, it's 70 years old or more, but it works fine. I've used this. I've made a lot of chips with this thing. And the blades are in good shape. And it's awful noisy though. So that's why these earmuffs. But that's a good solid machine. And this joiner here too is a good 70 years old. I bought these two at an auction at GE. I paid about $1,000 for the pair, but boy, they sure have been handy. I guess that's about all. This big old piece of walnut came from the tornado at Frankfurt. I made a number of tables and stuff from slabs like that, and that's the last one that I have. And if you notice under the darkness here, these rotary streaks. Bud Neat, a good friend of mine, had a tool and die shop downtown, and I had this one piece. And the problem with making tables from a thing like that is that you're cutting across a grain, and boy, it is a laboriously difficult task to get that flat. And so that piece remained in my inventory for years. And one day he saw it, and I told him why I'd never done anything. He said, "Oh, I'll put it on my bench grinder and flatten it out for you." And he did. It made a dust and a mess in his shop, but he was good for any pressure. I've used that a number of times. A nasty job. This is my table saw. The drawer underneath the extension here contains various shaping tools that I have with it. These are all cutters that make different kinds of moldings and other any shape you want, really. And these inserts go into this head right here and forms the shape. So I just replace the saw blade with this piece here, and then insert the tools that I want, the shape that I want. And then I use these filler pieces that I made out of brass to enclose the cutters and so forth on the tabletop. It takes the place of that red piece there. This tool is the heart of my workshop. It's a very nice tool, very high quality, professional. This thing is called a fence, and it regulates the distance between the saw blade and the back edge of the wood. And it's a very precision piece. It's amazing how accurately I can move it sideways in the position I want and lock it, and it'll be exactly where I've set it dimensionally. I've got electronic readouts on it right here, so that I can set a precision gap between the saw blade and the side of the fence. It's really a pleasure to be able to do that without having to measure and recut and redo work to get it exactly right. This is an expensive saw. It's the last time I looked, they were about $2,900, and the Bessemer fence I paid about $400, and I've had both of these about 12 years now. So, I haven't regretted a penny that I spent on these two tools, or any of the other tools for that matter. Over here I have some Swiss carving and chisel types of tools. These old chisels I got from Dad years ago. Well, I think I'll end this one here, and we'll go to the second video about my tools. So if you don't want to watch that one, you can turn that one off too.